Okay, welcome back, everyone, and welcome to all of you on Zoom. Um, so before we start our panel, where we're going to hear from members of Freedom House and learn about its enduring impact and how people in this room and online have worked to document and bring awareness to these history makers, I'm going to start with a brief overview of Freedom House for those of us who are joining via Zoom. So while I provide this overview, Sarah's going to put in the chat, for those of you on Zoom, the links to freedomhousedoc.com and links to the documentary videos we showed earlier. I'd encourage everyone on Zoom to visit them, and those of you in the audience here to also visit them as well. So over 65 years ago, before TV ever dreamed of the show Emergency, which we heard Freedom House had a profound impact on. And long before any of us could dream of a medical show set here in Pittsburgh, a quiet revolution was beginning here. Starting with 25 Black men and women deemed the, quote, unemployables, this pioneering group went on to provide the national standards for pre-hospital emergency care. Named the Freedom House Ambulance Service, they provided the best care to the most vulnerable population in Pittsburgh from 1967 to 1975. Some of the key players in Freedom House Ambulance were Dr. Peter Safar, the father of CPR and a campaign advocate for national and local ambulance design and medical training for ambulance drivers. Dr. Safar partnered with Mr. Phil Hallen, who we have here in the audience today. Mr. Hallen was president of the Maurice Falk Medical Fund, funder of Freedom House Ambulance. Together, they recruited Mr. James McCoy Jr., the founder of Freedom House Enterprises, an agency that helped find jobs, organize voter registration, and support civil rights activities in the Hill District, and Morton Coleman, an aide to the Pittsburgh mayor and part-time social work professor at Pitt, to recruit undereducated, unemployed African-American men for training to run an ambulance service in the Hill District. Another key player once Freedom House Ambulance was established was Dr. Nancy Caroline, who became the medical director of Freedom House and author of the first paramedic book. We'd also like to take time to remember the Freedom House Ambulance members we've lost along the way. And so with that, we're going to start the panel portion of tonight's program. We're first going to hear from our panelists before we open it up to questions. Those on Zoom can type their questions using the Q&A function. To our panelists, both on Zoom and in person, I'm thrilled we have so many people, but that means that I have to be the bad guy and keep all responses to 2 minutes. So for those of you here in person, I believe we'll hold up in the back a finger or sign. There we go. And those of you on Zoom, Sarah will hold up a finger for 1 minute, and then we'll also sort of have an unceremonious cutoff. To begin, if he is here on Zoom, let me see. So yes, to begin, I'm going to ask Phil Safar, the son of Dr. Peter Safar, about his recollection of your dad's involvement with Freedom House.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, well, thank you. I have a short few words to share with you. First, my brother Paul was regretfully unavailable to appear this evening, but will join later if he can. We both welcome the opportunity to be present at this forum. 1 year after my sister Elizabeth died of cardiac arrest, I was 7, and I remember going with our father Peter, or Opa as he was later affectionately called by his grandchildren, to Presby Hospital on various occasions and seeing the first Freedom House ambulances. I didn't understand the full magnitude of what was being done at that time, but even as a kid, I knew it was a big deal as I watched the new ambulances come into the ER. Opa Peter was a born teacher and innovator, along with being an advocate for social justice and change, having lived through the horrors of discrimination and World War II. He used those memories and his talents and his passion for improving health delivery, coupled with his unbridled tenacity, working with a gifted team, many of you who are here today, as he did in developing CPR. He recognized that a community-based program was vital to its success. You are all part of that history and part of preserving it for the future. Our mother, Eva, or Oma Eva, as she is also called by her grandchildren, is going strong at 94, and I wanted us to share her appreciation to all of you for recognizing and preserving the lasting legacy of this important work and carrying the torch forward for the next generations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I must admit, I'm a little starstruck up here, so bear with me, both with the people we have on Zoom and up in front. And with that, I'm now we'll start with those who are here in person and then move to those who are on Zoom. I'm going to turn it over to the members of Freedom House that we have with us today to share about how they came to Freedom House and what their role was. And so for those in person, I think we'll just go down the line. So Mr. Nella, do you mind if I start with you?
Yeah, I do. But...
We just
well, she called me Darnella. That's my name, Darnella Wilson. I was 17 when is this on? I can't, okay.
Yeah.
I was 17 when I went to work at Freedom House. I was just fresh out of high school. I was laying on my sister's couch as we had just come from graduation, and I was taxed from all the graduation stuff. And Walt Brown Jr., who was the assistant director at Freedom House, was a really, really good friend of my sister's. And he would come over and visit, and he see me laying on the couch, and he looked at me and he said, "Well, you need a job." And I said, "No, I don't." And he said, "No, you really need a job." I said, "I did. I just graduated from high school. I do not need a job right now." He said, "No, you need a job. I'll be here at 7 o'clock in the morning to pick you up, be ready to go." And I looked at my sister. I said, he's serious? He said, "Yeah, I'd be ready to go if I was you." And I said, "I don't believe this." But the next morning I got ready. He was there at 7 o'clock, and on my way to Freedom House I went, and I'm 17 years old. I'm thinking, oh my God, all these old people gonna be there. What am I supposed to do with all these old folks or whatever? But it turned out to be one of the most, I was a dispatcher, and it turned out to be the most rewarding and challenging part of my young life. And after I left there, after the city abruptly took over the program, and I went to the city, I was trained as a paramedic, which meant I was the youngest paramedic in the city of Pittsburgh back then, because I was only 18 after I was a paramedic, and everybody else was older there. And so the journey went on, and I became a paramedic, and I went on to become a registered nurse. And okay, I retired 35 years after that. Went back to school. I have my culinary degree. I'm also a songstress, a singer. I've sang with Freddie Hubbard, Kenny Blake, and all the rest of them. And I'm just going to continue, and I'm getting ready to graduate again with another associate's degree from community college. I had no idea. I went back to school for music because I figured I'm just going to rock out on music. And I go back and they say, "Well, you know, you got 64 credits in your academic general studies or whatever." I'm like, "What? Okay, well, you're going to walk in May, so we're going to give you another associate's degree, and you can do whatever you want after that." So that's what I'm doing now. So thank you.
We'll pass it down to Mr. Larry Underwood.
Good afternoon, everybody. I was an Army medic. I was a non-commissioned officer in charge of an outpatient clinic. We had 6, 7 doctors, Stanford, Harvard, whatever. And I discharged from the Army. I was working at a company called Joseph Horn Company, and I was fine with that. My cousin Cassandra Sloan came to me and said, "You want to be an ambulance?" And I was like, "Okay." I probably went up. Mr. Holland, Harold Holland, gave me a test. Come back. He flunked the test. I said, "What?" He said, "Didn't you read the book?" I said, "What book?" He said, "Right here." I said, "Oh." Read the book and became a freedom house. There's a lot about Freedom House, and I go on and on. My daughter told me 2 minutes.
Oh,
The guys, Mr. McCary is still one of my best friends.
Thank you very much.
We got along very well. And we got along. Certain jobs, when you start getting along with somebody, they don't like that. But there was one thing about Freedom House, which I did like. When you came in the morning, they would say, "Mr. Underwood, you go with Mr. Simmons, you go with." You never argued about that. You just went with the person. It was a mixture. We had a Jackie Robinson. His name was Rainovich. He also had Mr. Simmons, who I loved it when he would say, they would say, "Mr. Simmons, you go with Mr. Underwood." He would always say, that was his dig. He would say, "Whatever's fair." He would say that. So, Mr. Rainovich, I got a chance to be with him again. We used to go to Eddie's restaurant on the hill, get breakfast in the morning. So Rainovich said to me, "You guys, you go up there and you go, yeah, you go to breakfast every morning and you get them grits." He never had them before. He said, "Come on with us." We took him up there. He said, "What kind of potatoes are these?" He reminded me of this last time in the town. He said, "What kind of potatoes are these?" Yeah, let's get to man, Eddie's restaurant. Come on. So the next morning he said, "We going to Eddie's and get some grits." "Yeah, Rainy, but we're going up there."
Thank you, Mr. Underwood. Sorry. Thank you so much. Chief Moon?
John Moon. I started out as a hospital orderly and worked there for about 5 or 6 years, and saw two of Freedom House's paramedics come in, and it was something about these two gentlemen, I never knew who they were, that they commanded the attention of that room. I didn't have to say anything. Their uniforms were nice and crisp and white. And I was just in awe of them. So some of you can't realize it, but I went to the Yellow Pages and found out where Freedom House's offices were and walked in and asked for employment. And the gentleman said, "Okay, that's great. If I showed you a picture of the heart, would you be able to diagram the circulatory system?" "No." "If I showed you a picture of the lungs, would you be able to label the respiratory system?" "No." He said, "Okay, you're not qualified to work here." I left there somewhat dejected, but that little voice in the back of my head kept saying, "This is what you wanted to do. It's up to you to find out how to get there." So I went and found a EMT program at North Park Fire Academy that lasted for 13 weeks. I went there, passed the course, and went back to Freedom House, and I was hired on the spot. My career at Freedom House continued up until 1975 when Pittsburgh EMS merged with them, consumed them. And I worked there for 34 years, retiring in 2009 as the assistant chief. And I spent the remaining part of my retirement bringing back the history of Freedom House that we see today and that we all take for granted. Thank you.
Good job.
And
Oh, my God.
now, Mr. McCary, you're up.
Excuse me for not standing, but I've been having problems the last couple of years. But my name is George McCary III. I was born 4/29/48. That covers all the time. I started October the 11th, 1968. I walked into my first classroom with Freedom House, and I seen some guys that I almost backed out the room because I knew them in the street. And I said, "Oh, these guys are rough," but everything changed. What was the major about my experience is my grandmother. Her name was Mom Alice. I came in one morning. I lived in the projects. I'm not ashamed, but I'm from the project. And she told me I had to get out. I woke up then. You had to get out. She said, I don't like what you're doing. You know what I mean? You don't want to go to school. You don't want to get a job. So you got to get out. I couldn't argue with her because I was trained not to argue with my grandmother. Whatever she raised me, whatever she said, ruled. So I got ready to get out, and I made a phone call to a relative of mine, Gene Keys. He was up there. He asked me what was wrong. I told him what was wrong, and he told her that he's going to recruit me to come into the service, make sure that I get in there. He's going to sign me up and make sure that I'm in it. But he got to have a place to study, and he got to have a place. He got to pass the test. If he don't pass the test, he don't get the job. I looked at her. I said, "Well, you think it's the problem. The problem is I'm gonna pass this not because I want it, because I was gonna go to state police. That was on my mind because back in just 1968, when all you need is a driver's license more or less and a little intelligence, you could have been a state police. So I thought that would have been much easier. But I got into something that made history and made humanity, gave humanity a second chance, because we had several wars and wasn't there. Wasn't there till I got involved, man. And I got involved there. It got it got prosperous, so prosperous that the world finally tuned into Freedom House. And I'm not going to hold you long because I can do this.
Yeah.
They gave me the microphone too early.
Yeah. We're gonna have to cut you off. We'll give one more sentence.
Okay.
Before we.
Just, I love everybody that showed up and everybody who had a part of this situation. I can really appreciate you and keep saving lives. Keep saving lives because it's. And remember one thing.
Non-sentence.
As easy as ABC, airway, breathing, and circulation. That's life.
Ah. We're now going to turn it over to some of our Freedom House participant panelists on Zoom, but that is a tough act to follow. I do not envy any of them. Mr. Renovich, can I call on you you've already gotten a shout out from one of our in-person panelists, so would you please speak a little about how you came to Freedom House and your role?
It's my pleasure. So honored to be here. And yes, I learned so many lessons about life and EMS care from this crew. The book, Kevin, is marvelous. The documentary, Gene, amazing. And the grits were fabulous that day. I remember this moment. I was 14 and my grandfather was dying of a heart attack on the second floor, and we waited forever for an ambulance to come. And the usual 1967 type Pontiac ambulance came that was standard. And a couple of guys came as soon as they could pull themselves up from the bar, And in '60s, that's where you got your ambulance drivers out there in the rural community. They were the volunteer firefighters sitting in the room drinking, and they got over there, and everybody got in the vehicles, and everybody's going to the hospital, and they needed somebody to ride with a patient who is my soon-to-die grandfather, cyanotic, fulminant pulmonary edema, gasping under oxygen. And I was the one who got to ride in the back with him to take the high-speed ride through the city. And I found my calling at that moment. So I have to tell the short story and just go, I ended up in the military as a Navy hospital corpsman and a Marine Corps medic I was the hospital corpsman for the 3rd Platoon Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 28th Marines, 5th Marine Division. And in history, that's the unit that put the flag up over Iwo Jima. So I was in a historic unit. But it was also where they put racial minorities and troublemakers. So African Americans, Hispanics, Orientals, anybody that didn't fit, Native Americans, they were put in that unit. And one night they were beat up terribly by the other Marines who were jealous of the unit. And they pulled the hospital corpsman, and they had to resolve the racial tensions in that. I showed up for work that day being transferred to that unit, and they say, good news and bad news. You're going into this fabulous historic unit. The bad news, well, they get attacked at night by other Marines. Not only happened one time, but it happened for real. I didn't have a choice. I went in. I got along famously with everybody. I never had a moment of tension. It was cool. When I was taking care of a patient, Dr. John Newell spoke to Dr. Butler there, and he said, there's something going on out in the world of EMS. It's 1968 in the summer with the Tet Offensive going on, and something's happening out there. I was hearing about Freedom House without knowing it at the time. When I was discharged honorably from the military, looking to go back to college, happened to want to go back to my hometown of Pittsburgh, asked my parents, is there something happening there with ambulances and that? Just if you could find out. My mother worked at Carnegie Mellon as a reserve room librarian. She had a connection with Mike Bolton, who worked with Cyril Wecht, who connected to Freedom House. The next thing you know, I had a name to write to Peter. I hear the name is Safar now. We called him Safar then, but Safar, I guess. And I sent Peter Safar a letter, got to Pittsburgh, walked in off the street, and found myself very soon with a uniform and in the streets. And I was treated with grace and dignity and with a great group. And the rest is well written and well recorded now in history, but I only want to set the record straight. DEI isn't perfect. DEI is questionable because I was that DEI hire. And you can argue about whether that worked out or not. But I swear I was only white on the outside. That's it.
Thank you. And now we have one more Freedom House person on the Zoom, Mr. Lindell. Your 2 minutes of fame.
My 2 minutes of fame. I'm a Philadelphia lad. I started an ambulance business in Montgomery County. I transferred from home in Norristown to get away from home and to get from a small Philadelphia college to a large university. I transferred to Pitt, wanted to protest the Vietnam War and whatever. One day I'm on Forbes Avenue near Bouquet. This is 73. I run into a Freedom House ambulance. I talk to the folks. They tell me to go see Mitch Brown up in Presby. I do, and in 74, I was hired and worked there until I went to the city in their first class. EMS for me was a calling. I'm not going to bore you all with it, but it is an act of God. It has kept me practicing for 51 years before I retired clinically. And I've been an educator with appointments at medical schools and at the University of Pittsburgh and whatever. And Freedom House, when I walked in on that first day looking for Curtis Scott, and found out that he was probably 70 years old and he was going to be the crew chief that I was reporting to. That was unusual enough. And Tom Preston was leaning across the telemetry, looked at me, shook his head and grunted like, eh. The next sound you heard was my knees banging together for the next 2 hours. As it turns out, the folks at Freedom House were some of the most loving, kind, great educators, taught me how to navigate different environments, take care of people, and learn great medicine. And I will just reinforce what Bill Rainovich said, readily accepted, no problems, changed my life. So much for my 2 minutes of.
Thank you so much. So with that, we're now going to hear from some of the folks that have helped to capture this history. First, Mr. Gene Sturzenski, who created the first documentary we saw tonight for those that are in person. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how, again, 2 minutes, sorry to be the bad guy, how you learned about Freedom House and created this documentary.
Okay, well, I joined the Marine Corps at 17 years old, and I actually got out of the Marine Corps. I was 19 years old, and I was in infantry and military police. So I wanted to become a police officer, but I was only 19 at the time. You had to be 21 to be a police officer. And I ran into some folks that said, "Hey, why don't you get a job on an ambulance that has a red light and a siren?" And there was an ambulance company on the north side of Pittsburgh that hired me, Tri River Ambulance. And from that ambulance company, we just did transports. I used to see Freedom House at St. John's Hospital. They were, because it was on the north side, and I'd see their ambulance, and I'd look in their rigs and see all the sophisticated equipment. And I'd ask the guys that I worked with about them, but there was a lot of racial tension, and it's all they said was they're a bunch of, you know what, and they have crap games in the back of those ambulances. They have crap games at the station, and they roll people in those ambulances. So I knew that wasn't right. Then later on, I ended up getting a job at Southside Hospital in the emergency room, 3 to 11:30. Which is ironic because you're doing a story about, Freedom House with the Pitt, which is about the emergency room, which is basically, even though I was in the emergency room, it started in 71. It's the only thing different is the technology, and you have more people now. We have less people working in the emergency room. So from that, I started getting a lot of experience because there was only me. I was an orderly, then became an ER tech. There was a nurse's aide, and there was an RN and a doctor. That was it for our shift. So I got to do a lot of things that were out of my scope, technically illegally, but the doctors trained me to do it. And that's what I did. So the administrator of the hospital said to me, "I can't give you any more raises because you got to be a nurse." And I wouldn't be a paramedic. And at that time, the only paramedics there were in Pittsburgh was Freedom House. So I went to talk to Dr. Saffer. He said for me to go and see Mitch Brown at Presby Hospital. So in 1973, I went to Presby and met with Mitch, and he told me there was no openings. So I left it alone, went back to the Southside Hospital, and then I knew there was a paramedic program in Los Angeles that was just starting. So I ended up in 74. I moved to Los Angeles, and I ended up working for a private ambulance company that sponsored me to paramedic training. And I went through the very first class at Daniel Freeman Hospital in January 1975. And I graduated as the 972nd paramedic in LA County. That's how new the program still was. So it's always, and even when I was at that paramedic program, Winnie Hobbs was our administrator. She knew that I was from Pittsburgh, and she was updating me on what was going on in Pittsburgh. She kept telling me about Nancy Caroline was doing there. And then when I became a paramedic in 75, Freedom House went out of existence. But I always had the dream about what was this all about, because I never really got to, find out. So I talked to Dr. Saffer, and I came to Pittsburgh in 84, and he told me to meet Phil Hallen. So I went to meet with Phil Hallen, and I put him on a cassette recorder. There was no video recorders, and talked about Freedom House. And he told me to go see Jerry Esposito. Jerry Esposito ran a company called Citizens Ambulance. He helped start Freedom House. I always wanted, my dream was to find out more about Freedom House. And what happened was right after 9/11 in 2000, I took my own money and I brought a cameraman, started shaking, rattling trees and bushes and everything else to find members. And it took me almost 10 years to complete the documentary.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you, yes, for all of that. And that documentary really, it was pioneering.
I'll say one thing, if it wasn't for him
Yes.
starting that documentary, we would not be sitting.
Yes, yes.
So my hat's off
Oh.
to Jane.
Let me say something, one thing too.
Okay, real quick.
Gene was working for a film company. He asked them to do it and they wouldn't touch it. He took his own money, 10
Yeah,
years,
right.
and started. And if it don't be for him, we wouldn't be here today.
Yep, yes.
Thank you.
Pioneering to get this history. Amazing. And moving, that it still took almost 15 years later to get the next documentary. And we have Annette Banks on Zoom who made that one. And I was wondering if Ms. Banks, if you could, in 2 minutes, sorry it's so quick, tell a little bit about how you learned about Freedom House and created that documentary.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Thank you again for inviting me to be a part of this today. So I have to go back. It was during COVID, and the schools in Pittsburgh, well, everywhere, but in Pittsburgh were closed. And I saw a tweet one day from the Heinz History Center talking about a webinar they were going to have, and it was about Freedom House Ambulance. And they said one of the original paramedics will be here to talk about it and answer any questions you have. And I had not heard about Freedom House, so I was like, well, what is that? And started researching, and the more I learned, the more I read, the more people I talked to, the more engaged I was, and just felt like it was a story that I would like to do. And at that point, I was working with WQED, and they were completely supportive of it. Someone there introduced me to Phil Hallen, and Phil introduced me to John Moon, and John Moon introduced me to others, and that's how it came apart.
And so now that we've heard from our documentarians, I'm going to ask Kevin Hazard, who wrote the book American Sirens, to also answer the same question. How did you learn about Freedom House and decide to write this book?
Thank you. It's really great to be here. I appreciate you all having me on. I was a paramedic for 10 years in the city of Atlanta, and that decade was a transformative experience in my life. It turned me into the person I was. And I wrote a memoir about it, and somebody who read that book reached out to me and said, hey, I read your story, but have you ever heard this other story? Have you ever heard of Freedom House? And I hadn't. And so I started to, I went online and I tried to figure out what it was. They researching, and then I realized, what an incredible event this was, and how important it was, and quite literally changed the way lives are saved around the world. And I, as a paramedic, I was the offspring of the people who had created this, and I wanted their story to be told. And so I started reaching out to everybody I could find who had been a part of it, and just spent a couple of years, getting all the information that I could, and going into Nancy Caroline's papers and Dr. Saffer's papers, and just trying to lay out what the story looked like and how it happened. And as while I was writing it was, George Floyd was happening, COVID was happening. There were so many things that were in the news that existed, at that time that they had gone through all this. I realized, like, wow, this is an incredible piece of history, but it's not really history. It's something that we're still continuing to live today, which just felt like an incredibly important thing to tell. And so, I just spent a number of years working on it, and was very happy to be able to be part of bringing this story out.
Thank you so much. So we're now going to transition a little into the present. And so this question is for Chief Gilchrist. who is our current chief of EMS here in Pittsburgh. How is I feel so bad again asking this, knowing the limited time. How has Freedom House impacted your career in EMS?
Well, I would say that my story is a lot less exciting than all the ones that we've heard today. When I started with the city of Pittsburgh, I was a single mom, and at that time, I just needed a job. And it wasn't until working for the city for several years that I slowly got to learn about Freedom House and its impact on basically the nation. It's impacted me in the fact that I know that the original Freedom House members didn't get the opportunities that I have. The sacrifices that they made allowed me to sit here. So it's important to always know your history so then you can go along with the future. I actually worked, when I first started with the city of Pittsburgh, I actually worked with Darnella Wilson in the same station. John Moon actually was integral in hiring me. I had met him as one of the first people with the city of Pittsburgh. So Freedom House has just definitely impacted everything up into the fact that the city of Pittsburgh, with the help of the city of Pittsburgh and the current mayoral administration and all of their support, was able to open up the first ever Freedom House EMT Academy. And we're able to actually train EMTs, and they can have a living wage while they're getting their education. We hope to go further, and that's on just the legacy of Freedom House.
Thank you. And so, as advertised, Rescue to Real, we're now going to hear from some of our panelists that have impacted the Pitt, and the clips for those of you who were here in person that you saw earlier. And so first, I'm going to ask my partner in crime with putting this event on tonight, Dr. Owusu Ansah, about your meeting with the Pitt writers and sharing this history with them.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm so excited to see Dr. Joe Sachs on here. Phenomenal human being. I know everybody's like, no, Wiley, Dr. Carter. This is the guy. John Wells, R. Scott Gemmell, Dr. Joe Sachs wrote that episode that you saw earlier today, and you'll hear from him. And so, they asked of us, I had the opportunity, thanks to Beth, long story short, there's a nonprofit called Hollywood Health and Society that has a database of health professionals that looks to create accuracy in medical dramas. Thanks to Dr. Hoffman, they were looking for somebody to talk about health disparities and some additional cases in Pittsburgh. She reached out to me. They reached out to me. Lo and behold, I was in front of the writer's room of the Pitt literally a year ago, almost today. I met with Dr. Sachs, and he asked me questions about health disparities, demographics, but particularly, what would you want a medical drama to show or produce that hasn't been done yet? And I said, you cannot talk about the healthcare in Pittsburgh without talking about Freedom House, period, end of story. There are there's some documentation out there for it, but it is the foundation for which we are all here today. I am the EMS medical director at the Children's Hospital. I would not be here today if it weren't for any of these folks in the room. And so I'm grateful to Beth, I'm grateful to Hollywood Health and Society, I'm grateful to Dr. Joe Sachs and the crew for actually listening and producing and writing and putting it out there. I'm grateful to the folks like Jean, like Kevin, like Annette for putting that history out there. And we are going to continue. So that is my story. Thanks.
Thank you. Hear briefly from Dr. Sheila Roth and Dr. Ron Roth, who have also consulted with the show. And so I was hoping that both of you could speak briefly about what that experience was like.
My experience was kind of a shock to me. Like we were at home, I'm looking at home, I get an email from Herman Lear Center, California, saying you had quite like to talk with writers of a new show coming to Pittsburgh. And I was like, so my husband said, well, what's the person's name and Google it and see. So I did, spoke with the center, Dr. Sachs. I actually was wonderful. They had sent me many cases.
Social work types of cases, and they said, what would you do in this case? And it was just an amazing experience. And so what the fun part for me is watching the show and seeing the stuff that we talked about in the writer's circle on Zoom come to life. And so it's just been an amazing experience. And the social worker on that show, I just have to say, she's beautiful and she's wonderful. And that was one of my requests. Please don't make the social work be old and frumpy.
If you don't mind, I'd like to tell a Freedom House story.
Sure.
So I grew up in Pittsburgh, went to Penn State undergraduate, took an EMT course, and all I wanted to do was do a ride along with Pittsburgh EMS. That was my dream. And when I started medical school in '78, I started doing ride alongs. And not knowing anything about Freedom House, I got to ride with some of the people here, some of the people on Zoom. You know, Bill Rainovich was telling me about a call that I'd forgotten about that we were on together. But I remember a call in the projects. We heard about the projects. The projects had a horrible reputation. You watch the news, so-and-so was killed there. And one of the first calls was there. I was scared. The two medics who were part of Freedom House said, don't worry, they respect us. Walk in between us, and we're going to have no problems. Everything went smooth. When I started asking about Freedom House, the medics, downplayed Freedom. Said very not so nice things. So I am so incredibly honored to attend these things and learn the reality. So proud to be a little part of where EMS history started.
And I think that's a perfect segue into asking Dr. Sachs, one of the producers for the Pitt and one of the writers who wrote the episode that aired last week that mentioned and featured Freedom House, about the process of writing this storyline. And why did you decide to tell it in this way with a member of Freedom House as a patient?
Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me. Sitting next to me is a native son of Pittsburgh and an important member of our crew, one of our executive producers, and I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Oh, hi, I'm Mike Hisrick, and like Joe said, I was born there and raised there, and have been with these guys since the beginning of ER, but more importantly to this, I grew up around the fire service in the eastern suburbs. My grandfather and my father and my brother and I all served in the local volunteer fire departments and EMS. And my brother ultimately became a city medic and public safety director. And I, as a 10-year-old, 15-year-old, I remember hearing about Freedom House. And the guys, they were legends. As I watched the development of Pittsburgh EMS, because yes, I'm that old. There was always city EMS was great, and it was born out of it was born out of Freedom House, and the impact on emergency medical services, not only in the Hill District but in the city and the state and the country. Can't be underestimated.
Great. So I guess I'll start by thanking Dr. Owusu-Ansah for spending time with us, and also Sheila and Ron Roth for spending time with us. Just a reality check on social work in Pittsburgh and some of the key issues that we dealt with. Sheila was so helpful. And Ron helpful in so many ways for episodes yet to come. so stay tuned. But I guess the question is, where do stories come from for this show? And when we had our briefing with Dr. Usu-Ansah, a lot of great things came up, and those kind of go into the well of potential stories. The way we don't create stories is to say, hey, let's do a story about colon cancer, because colon cancer is really important and people should know about that. We always start with the dramatic needs of the character. And if we have something in our well of stories, and the well is very deep, that fits the needs of the character, then that's what we go with. In the pilot, the question was, what would make a medical student faint on the first day? And that was the origin of the degloved, dislocated leg that was featured. And with this particular story, which I knew I wanted to get into the episode, because it's the roots, it's the origin of the entire EMS system, and no one knows this story. After our briefing with Dr. Usu-Ansah, I watched the WQED documentary, which gave me even more insight to it. So there's two things happening in this story. Number one, we established Dr. Langdon as an exceptional teacher, as he makes the diagnosis and teaches the residents how to float in a transvenous pacemaker. And establishing Dr. Langdon as an exceptional teacher, the guy who's in line for a medical education fellowship, is a very important stepping stone in the dramatic tapestry of the entire year. And the other is that I realized by making Robbie's mentor, it's the anniversary of the death of Robbie's mentor, Dr. Adamson, who's an African-American physician leader in the field. And he would have been a medical student right when Freedom House was getting off the ground. So I realized that to make his mentor an integral part of the program, this is fiction, if you'll allow me some dramatic license, by making him a part of the program, the patient, Mr. Alexander's memories of Dr. Adamson would resonate with Robbie in a very deep way. So that's what's going on dramatically. The actor who played the patient, Harold Sylvester, absolutely fantastic. I was also able to throw in a little bit of a obscure medical case called Twiddler syndrome, the fact that he's got some dementia and isn't even aware that he's twiddling his pacemaker around, which broke the leads. We got to throw that in. But most importantly, it was a double victory, because we told a great dramatic story for forwarding the stories of Langdon, for Robbie and his mentor. And we also told, and for millions of people, told the story of Freedom House and how important it was in the history of pre-hospital care in America.
Thank you. That's a perfect segue to, we are honored to also be joined by Mr. Harold Sylvester Jr., who played Willie Alexander, the patient who was a member of Freedom House. And Mr. Sylvester, I'd like to ask, how did you prepare for this role, and what was it like representing Freedom House ambulance?
My first preparation started by being born in the same projects that some of your Freedom House ambulance people were born in, except mine was in New Orleans. But now I'm looking forward to going to Eddie's on my next trip to Pittsburgh and getting some of those grits. And just how they compare, with our grits down in New Orleans.
Oh, it's gone. He's just gone.
Okay, got you. Well, there's an Eddie's like place there, I'm sure. We'll go find it. But the bottom line is, all the rhythms, from that wonderful script were just right. And they made sense to me, from my first read. And then when I got to the set and Joe gave me the documentary to watch, it just kind of confirmed that I think my initial instincts were right, because of my background, and so. But he nailed it, with the appropriate words, with incredible, real inner city grounded rhythms, and so it was an easy job. I knew these characters. I know you guys. And I know that story, that we continuously have to retell, so about how capable we are and how often, we're not allowed, to demonstrate our capabilities. It was just, one of those things. Luck, is preparedness, meeting opportunity. And this was one of those cases. Everything was just right. And so because your story is a story that needs to be told. And I'm glad that I had, at least a little bit of an experience that allowed it to get told reasonably well.
Thank you so much. And and last but certainly not least for the panel, before we open up to questions, we have the, what did you say, not frumpy, Crystal McNeil, who plays the social worker Kiara on the Pitt. And Ms. McNeil, I just wanted to ask for you, what was it we didn't watch the full episode, we just watched the Freedom House scenes, because Noah gave us a heads up about how heavy of an episode it was. But what was it like to be a part of this episode, this show, and learn about Freedom House as part of this episode?
It was a big surprise learning about it. Coming into, this episode is really heavy. And so it was easy to be focused on the parts of the episode that directly affected my character. But right before one of my scenes is where you see them coming in and talking about Freedom House. And I had not been familiar with it, but what piqued my ear was that it was in the Hill District. I do a lot of August Wilson work. And so being able to the minute I saw something in the Hill District, I was like, what is this? And I had never actually heard of Freedom House Ambulance. And so when we got the script for that episode, one of the things that actually helped me get through that script, because it was so hard, was to divert my attention to the story of Freedom House and just the significance of what that, did in American history. And I remember finding out about that, but also just being so surprised that existed and I knew nothing about it. And I just absolutely love the fact that time was being taken to tell the story, and it wasn't just something that was thrown in there or just mentioned, but I was like, time is actually being taken. And it's one of the things that I just love about the show overall, is that everything is so intentional. And because it's intentional, it has such an immense impact on people who see themselves in these stories and then who are able to see their stories being told and have a voice. Just because it's just so much. I think when you tell a story intentionally, you give voice to people who are kind of tired of seeing their stories not told or just told incorrectly. That, I don't know if that answered the question or if I went off on a tangent, but yeah.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists.
Thank you.
So we are now going to open it up for questions. We're going to alternate between an in-person and a Zoom. For those of you in person, we ask that you wait until you get a microphone so that those on Zoom can hear. And then I will, or Sarah will read out questions from Zoom for everyone here to hear. I did want to just add one more thing. My entertainment, media, and health class here at Pitt, as part of the class, we're analyzing social media data related to the Pitt, specifically looking at Reddit. And for this episode, there has been so much talk now about, oh my gosh, I never heard of Freedom House. I'm a paramedic. I never heard of this. I'm a doctor. I never heard of this. I'm from Pittsburgh. I never heard of this. And so it's been incredibly heartwarming to see people hear it and people being rightfully angry that this history has for so long not made it to the forefront. So for everyone here who has created documentaries, written about it, told your stories, put it out on Max, just thank you so much. Okay, do we have any in-person questions? Also, oh, okay.
Hi, I don't like being first, but here we are. So my question is, little background. As I'm a paramedic, I just graduated from the Center of Emergency Medicine, their paramedic program last spring. And I guess my question is regarding how, in the face of adversity, when seeing people that didn't necessarily give you the credit that you deserved and kind of undermining you and your skill set, how did you deal with that and keep going to feel that you were able to make an impact? Because I feel like imposter syndrome is really real, and I can't even imagine to the degree that you guys faced. So kind of just asking that.
Well, I'll just give you my version. Being 17, going to Freedom House and becoming a dispatcher and going on to the city. Where I left was a bunch of black faces, and I'm just a child. And I go to the city, and there's nothing but white faces. It was trauma. It was real trauma for me. The way I was treated, when I got there, whether I was female, whether I was black, or whether I was what. But you just have to keep persevering. You just have to keep it moving. And I mean, if you address the situations that come to you, address them so you don't keep them like locked up in your mind. Address them and then leave them alone. But always protect yourself out there. You have to. That's all I have to say about that. Good luck, girl.
Can I say this? Can I say this? I was in the wrong building. I was on top of the hill, and I was with a whole class of nurses. I said, "You hear Freedom House?" None of them knew about Freedom House. I run into that every day. About Freedom House. Now I go to different hospital appointments. On Freedom House, no, they looking right up. Looking right up. So, I mean, you can be anywhere. I talked to a elderly black lady that Thursday nights. Hey, I wanted to tell you things. He's living Philly. So, the group there, older guy, black guy, older black lady. I was saying, you ever hear Freedom House? Lady was from the hill, the older black lady, had never heard of Freedom House. Young girl, I said, look it up. She, the older guy. There's a lady that lives in the hill. I said to her, you look familiar. And I said, you from the hill? She said, yeah. Older guy, he told me, thank you for your service as he stuff out of.
I feel like we're making us all hungry here. So before asking this next question, I did want to read, we have a comment on the Zoom that says, as a proud paramedic from Tennessee, instead of a question, I want to say thank you. Thank you for being pioneers and paving the way for others to follow. The lives that you have saved and touched is beyond measure. God bless you all.
Beautiful.
Now for the question, how did the dispatch system work for the initial members of the Freedom House?
Worked very well.
Yeah, we did. We did a 10.
Unsung.
We did a 1097 code. It was 1097, 1096, 1098. We always knew where the ambulances were at all times. And also Nancy Caroline knew where the ambulances were at all times. Her and Peter Saffer. And it was interesting. I keep saying that because I was just a kid. You know what I mean? There. And it was amazing. And when we had our dispatch, but the police dispatch called us by phone. They called us by phone. They gave us the addresses and the nature of the calls, and we would write it down, and then we would hang the phone up, and then we would get on a dispatch radio to dispatch the ambulances from the dispatch in Presby. Presby, Dr. Roth, I always look at him. He's from Presby. But
You're giving we got young people need to go look up the yellow pages and a corded phone.
yeah, what was really wild about that back then is you didn't have a 911 call. You had to dial out 7, 8 numbers off a police car in order to get a police officer. There was no 911 back then. It was, you had to call out like you would call your mother, you know what I mean? And, put the number, you had to dial the number in. So it wasn't like easy, but it worked well. I can just say it worked well.
I will never admit that any of us ever jump calls off a police radio without a dispatcher. Although it may have seemed that way sometimes.
It was just an accident every time.
And how the real stories come out. I think I saw a hand back there. And then we'll go down forward.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Jason Deakins. I'm a faculty here in Public Health, School of Public Health. First of all, I want to say it's a really great honor to have y'all here, so thank you. 2, didn't know that in my own family, Freedom House, Darnella Wilson is my whole family member. Didn't know that
Cousin
he was
Jason.
first of all coming. So it's good to see you guys. So I just want to tell you guys that because of you, folks like myself, like Dr. Hoffman, we are incorporating this into our classrooms. And there's a couple of my students here. What's up, y'all? I just want to let you know that we are teaching about you. We teach community health, health equity. And I think it's important for us to teach the foundation of where we come from, right? And so how do you feel that your stories are literally a part of our curriculum? What does that make you feel like?
For those that didn't hear on Zoom, we got a great, which was good response. Yeah. Keep going. Yeah. Others?
Anybody else want to answer? I'm the only one speaking.
Oh, I see George.
Let Mr. Moon
Okay.
answer that.
We should feel like a hero because, we didn't kill nobody. We didn't steal nothing from nobody. We saved their life and we took it to the next level, which is a strong thing to get to. Thank you very much.
Well, when I reflect on my time at Freedom House, it's one that I'm very, very proud of. We took a dream or vision of Phil Howland's, and we made it real. With our work out in the field, we impacted thousands of lives, the young, the old, the wealthy, the indigent, the prominent, and the anonymous. And, we served them all well for 8 years. And we weathered disappointments and setbacks and broken promises and frustrations to create a system that we all take for granted now, that's glorified on television. And that's my most proudest point. And the interesting thing about that is no one can ever take that away from us. We will always have that part of life.
And I'm going to concur with Mr. Moon.
So this next question from Zoom is to the writers and actors on the show. So first part is, with the rise in audiences craving more realistic settings and situations in entertainment, how do you find balance between realism and still holding audiences captivated? And related to that, for Ms. McNeil, what has been the most eye-opening or surprising thing related to emergency department social work?
I'll let Crystal go first. And you're muted.
Okay, so I think the thing that was first immediately surprising to me was how the scope of the job. Like, I didn't realize that there was so much that was involved with what an emergency department or medical social worker had to do. I remember the first time I had to encountered a medical social worker, I was so confused because I was like, why is she helping me with this? But I ended up finding out that that there's just such a, wide range of things that they have to do and that they're responsible for. And I didn't realize that they were so involved with mental health, and that they were able to and the degree to which they have to be so intelligent, like to be able to make a rapid assessment on a patient, and how closely that they worked with the attending physician. And so, like, I think that was the stuff that was really surprising to me. But also, just in speaking with social workers, I didn't realize the disconnect between what their image was to patients and who they actually were and how they actually just, showed up in the world, and at their jobs. And I think, speaking to multiple social workers, there was just this consistent, like, repeating of like that they were always like, just reminding me that they're there to help. And there's just so many people who don't know that they're there to help, or who don't think that they're there to help. And a lot of that has to deal with, like, media representation. And so I think that was, I think that was like another side of what I was, like, so surprised about. Just the scope of the job. I think that was like the, a big part.
I'll just say, well, first of all, I'm an actively practicing emergency physician to this day, and I couldn't get through 8 hours in a trauma center without the social worker. And I knew that, was something I wanted to portray in the show. And my most favorite person in the world is a social worker at my hospital. And she was kind enough to spend time with Crystal, talking to her about what she does. And I think some of that helped. In terms of the question about realism versus drama, I'll just say that within realism, there is great, great, great drama. And it takes someone, and it's not just me, we have, 5 other doctors working on the show, who is there experiencing it, to know the subtleties and the untold stories that can be told. It's like if I were working on a legal show, I would be lost, and my stories would come out of what I thought was right or what I've seen or heard before. But so much of what is fresh and real and never been seen before comes out of the real experience. I don't know everything about everything, but through briefings with experts, such as the briefing we had with Dr. Wusu Ansah, you mine for gold. So the show is and will continue to be deeply rooted in a realistic portrayal of a modern emergency department, and the stories will be there in a very dramatic fashion.
Unfortunately, we only have time. We're going to take one more in-person question, and then Dr. Wusu Ansah is going to close us out for the night. Because we did want to leave some time as well if people want to get books signed, get pictures for those that are in person. I think we already have a microphone back there.
I bet. So I'm Carl Kurlander. I'll try to sum this all up. I'm a professor here at Pitt. I used to be a screenwriter in Hollywood. Decades ago, I wrote a movie called St. Elmo's Fire, which was shot on the same sound stages where the Pitt is right now. So it's all come full circle. But since I've been back here, there's some amazing stories in Pittsburgh, and Freedom House is one of the most amazing. I also want to mention we also did a movie about Dr. Sylvia a few years ago that's now in a film festival and going around. But what I wanted to ask about was, one of the exciting things is what's going on now with Freedom House 2.0. I know that this isn't just, we have sequels, there's supposed to be a St. Elmo's Fire sequel. I think there's a Freedom House sequel that you're involved with. And I also wonder if the writers of the show are at all thinking about doing Freedom House 2.0 and incorporating that in some of the plot lines going forward.
Start. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I'm going to wait.
Chief Gilchrist, and do you want to talk a little bit about Freedom House 2.0?
So actually our program is actually called the Pittsburgh EMS Freedom House EMT Academy. Not to be confused with the UPMC program, that's Freedom House 2.0, and they actually teach their students how to become emergency responders. I usually try to pillage off their students for them to come to over to our side to become EMTs. The only thing that I can say is that I model our program on the legacy of Freedom House. With police and fire, everyone knows that you have to have you don't have to have certifications to get into those fields. They'll train you up. And in the city of Pittsburgh, we've always been behind the 8 ball. And looking at the model of the original Freedom House, taking members from the community and actually offering them job opportunities and training, that's sort of what we model our program off of. So hopefully we can continue doing that. We have an advanced EMT school going on right now, and hopefully we'll have paramedic school going on soon. But, if the show's producers or whatever would like to
Dr. Sack?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. We're just starting to write season 2. We're doing post-production, editing, and sound mixing. Today, I was a little late because we did the sound mix for episode 13, 2 more shows, 14 and 15 to finish up, but we're also starting to meet as a writer's room for season 2. So we will be organizing briefings and trying to fill the well so it is overflowing with great stories that we can use when they're appropriate. So definitely will be in consideration.
Before I turn it over to Dr. Wusu Ansah, I'll just say that I think you got plenty of ideas tonight for places people can eat or could mention on the show. So, Dr. Wusu Ansah, did you want to come up to? Sure.
All right. I know it's been quite a night, but I hope it's been a worthy night for y'all. Anybody who follows my post, I'm just going to put it out there at MD Owusu Instagram. I say it's still Black History Month. It's still February. So honored to be here. I say that to say that we are working on a congressional gold medal. I'm not going to talk about politics today. But what I am going to say is, in the face of adversity, there was a billboard that said, Black people will still be here in the future. I say that to say we are working on the congressional gold medal for these pioneers. Just like the Tuskegee Airmen got, just like the 6 888 ladies got, where I'm like, Tyler Perry, where were you for Freedom House? We need that, right? We are working on that, and together we can make it happen. How can you help? I'll just let you know where we are right now. Thankful for our Representative Summer Lee, not able to be here today, but thanks to Summer Lee, for the first time in history, we have a resolution in Congress for Freedom House Ambulance. Once we get co-sponsorship, that becomes a bill. Then Congress votes 2/3 the favor, and they get their medal. How can you help? You heard here today, there are people here around the corner that don't know about Freedom House. There are people in the Hill District that don't know about Freedom House. Healthcare, EMS, you name it, that don't know about Freedom House. There are about a couple of hundred of us in the room, a few more on Zoom. My homework to you is everybody here should tell at least one person about Freedom House. Because the more that people know, the more of a push we can get to Congress. Because part of the issue is congressional members don't know about Freedom House. So it's really hard to vote on something that you don't know about. So it is our job as constituents who put people in office to let our people in office know, to let our neighbors know, to let our family members know about Freedom House. And you have seen the people here themselves. For you young folks out there, and even the older folks that have their Twitter handles, X handles, whatever you want to call it, IG, DMs, your social media, blast this event on social media today, tomorrow. It is still Black History Month to the end of the week. Keep blasting. That's how we get the word out. So I want to strongly encourage you on that. I also want to acknowledge our special guests who are here, our folks from Pittsburgh EMS. We have representatives, we have Chief Frank, we have Chief Frank from the mayor's office. Ms. Pam Collier left earlier. We have Chief Tremmel here, obviously Chief Amira from Pittsburgh EMS. And our support staff, we have Judge Dwayne Woodruff, who is also an historian in himself. The first NFL players to go through law school, or go to law school and play football, is my understanding. So we are proud to have him here. It is Black History Month. Mr. Phil Halen, again, 95 years old. I loved it. I called him and he said, Sylvia, if I'm still alive in 2 weeks, I'll be there. I said, that's fair. Fair enough. Fair enough. Hopefully you're still alive and you can come. And we also want to give a shout out. We're gonna play this video. Were we able to play Dr. Slow-Mo's video? We're gonna play Dr. Slow-Mo's video. She took the time, one of the actors from the Pit. She also wants to say something to our Freedom House members. For those who can hear me, I also want to thank all of you online that I cannot see, but I know there are a lot of my EMS clinicians online, a lot of my EM doctors online, just a lot of people, friends, family, loved ones online who participated in this as well. So grateful to you all virtually. Obviously, those who came out in the treacherous 50-degree weather to be with us tonight. I know I was so worried it was going to be like, I was like, nobody's coming if it's going to be 20 degrees like it has been. But thank you all for coming out tonight as we're trying to pull up this video. Oh, yeah, and the pit game, as Mr. Arnella reminded me. So the hurdles of trying to find parking through that. And if we're not able to play the video, that's fine. Yes, and I want to thank the School of Public Health for hosting. We want to thank our fabulous IT team here. For all the work that they have done and are doing. All of our public health leadership that's hiding in the back there. I apologize, no more emails at 4 in the morning, 2 in the morning. Our faculty members all here, all of you, thank you. We could not have done this without you. You ready for the video? Okay, cue the video.
Hey everyone, I'm Supriya Ganesh. I play Dr. Samir Mohan on The Pit. I'm one of the actors. And I just want to start off by saying thank you to everyone in the medical community that's been tuning into the show. From the beginning, we knew, Noah, John, Scott, and our entire cast, we all knew that our number one goal was to represent your lives realistically and represent your day in a way that would make people understand what you go through. So we are so overwhelmed that you are seeing that, and we did right by you guys. So thank you so much for the response. And also big shout out to Freedom House. I had never heard about this piece of history before the show, before we filmed episode 8. And I feel so honored to be a part of reintroducing this piece of history to our viewers, because it really is the roots of emergency medicine, and it's a shame that it's not talked about more. So I feel really grateful that we were able to do that during Black History Month, and really pay respect and hold space for people who started emergency medicine in this country, essentially. So yeah, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all of your hard work. And we hope that you will continue to tune in, because we have so much more stuff to cover and the rest of the season to go.
Thank you, Sophia. I'm just going to take a quick moment. I want to acknowledge any first responders in the room, emergency medicine docs in the room. Can you either raise your hand or stand up? I want to honor you today. Thank you. And most importantly, I want to thank our panelists, both virtually from Atlanta to LA, to Oregon. Thank you so much. Obviously, our panels here. And most importantly, want to thank our Freedom House members. Can we give them a standing ovation for the work that they have done, for who they are? Thank you. Let us not forget. And lastly, just a reminder that it is the Pitt Day of Giving, and we have QR codes down here. We do have a red carpet. I know it's been a long night. We appreciate you coming. Feel free to come down one at a time to take pictures or do your red carpet post. Again, appreciate you all. Thank you, and we'll do this again soon.